Hello, Becky and Ron and Vic and Linda and Dale and Georgina and Celie. This is a Slinky. I've had it since January of 2012. I think I've written every sermon with it since I've been ordained, and it helps me focus. It's like fidget spinners for late in life clergy people. Give everybody a couple more moments to see who joins us. Glasses though. Hey, Georgina. Is Celie there?
You're muted.
Oh, you're muted, dear. Oh, there you are. Hello. Hello.
Now I'm unmuted. She is here, but she's in the background.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to wish her a happy birthday.
Hey, she said happy birthday. Her hearing's a little bad. Can you say it again?
Happy birthday, Celie.
Thank you, Jenny.
All right,
Thank you,
friends,
Jenny.
you got it. The Lord be with you.
Also,
Let us pray. Christ, whose insistent call disturbs our settled lives, give us discernment to hear your word, grace to relinquish our expectations, and courage to follow empty-handed wherever you lead, that the voice of your truth and love may reach to the ends of the earth. Amen. And that's the prayer we've been praying since we started doing the Radical Welcome curriculum, and I find it very, very, very a very good prayer. And I'm also finding myself running out of caffeine, so I'm going to continue to replenish. So here we are, friends. Thank you for joining the conversation about technology at St. Anne's. It's been about, let's see. We had this last conversation in May of 2021. So I thought we would do an update since now we're using more platform, we've made some changes, and at the same time, we've also opened up the nave and the parish hall for the first time today to welcome people to worship, which is made possible by the technology that we have. Not to mention, we have an online congregation of people, both folks who have been members of St. Anne's for years and those who are finding us along the way. So thank you for joining us in the conversation. I just wanted to have a time with y'all to kind of talk about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. And I want to give a shout out to Jason Wilkinson and Daryl Hamill and all of the folks who show up to help us run the technology, even when things go wrong, like they did today. Jason was on the phone with Jason Phelan from Grind and Brew Productions to get it fixed. I'm under the impression that the sound did get fixed. And we're just grateful for the people who helped make this happen, but we also bow to the mystery when things that worked yesterday don't work today, and give lots of credit to the Holy Spirit. So I'm just going to open it up. How are you? What do you think? How's it going where you are? Have you been to church? Have you been worshiping in the building? Have you been worshiping from home? What do you think?
Georgina here. We've been worshiping online. Been by the church several times. But what has impressed me is how the Holy Spirit provides for us what we need in order to continue to worship together as a community. And whether it's Jason or Daryl or the other hands that come together to say, we can do this and this is how we're going to do this. I am always amazed. It works. It works. And because it works, again, that's part of the sweet, sweet spirit that is St. Anne, and it comes across. It came across to me this morning, the closing hymn, and you all just sounded beautiful. I mean, you really did. Now, I realize some of the members of the choir are also in the congregation, and I did hear Barbie. Those voices just blend together, but it was just wonderful. It was just wonderful. It's working, Jenny, it's working.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Georgina. I'm glad to hear that it's working for y'all. So what has changed since the last time we had this conversation? Lots has changed. We started using a platform called Sling Studio, which would allow us to have 2 or more cameras working at the same time. But unfortunately, because a lot of people wanted to use Sling Studio, it put major components of it on back order, even to the point where they're still not being delivered, even though we ordered what we needed in September of 2020. We received 1 camera link, which would allow you to hook up a camera to the link and the link to Sling Studio. And then we would run an iPhone off of the internet to Sling Studio, which caused a bit of lag. And we would load up the videos, the choir, the solos, those kinds of things. But sometimes the quality that we would see that you would see at home would be far less than what was happening in the building. So we brought in Grind and Brew Productions to help us kind of step away from Sling Studio. And I'm sorry?
I said, isn't that a wonderful name? I'm sorry, I forgot you could hear me.
No, it's okay. It's Grind and Brew. Yeah, great guys, great name, very, very fueled by coffee. And they've been instrumental in a lot of churches getting their streaming up and running. I won't bore you with some of the details about the dismal company that we had initially that we bought all of our stuff through, but it was no, Julie, right? So then after we started making the leap away from Sling Studio, we also heard a lot of comments about projectors and screens, and they weren't very attractive. So we removed the projectors and the screens and hardwired two TVs down front for people to view on from the congregation and 1 in the back for the choir to have. And we moved cameras off the floor that were manually moved by people, which was a big trip and fall hazard with cords and with the flimsiness of the tripods. And now we have 2 cameras that are permanently mounted on the wall that pan. So they move across, right? They zoom, and then they can tilt up and down. And that is what you're experiencing now when you join us from home. We were able to hook up 4 room microphones that capture the choir when they sing and the congregation when they sing. And we were able to have our wireless microphone be used by our AV people so that when a prayer request is shared online, they may speak it into the community and you hear it both at home and we hear it in the building. We walked away from Sling Studios. We're using Streamlab. Not that I expect y'all to know what that is, but Streamlab allows us to simultaneously go live on Facebook and YouTube at the same time. and YouTube records it, Facebook records it. And so once it's out there forever. And then I add it to our playlist for YouTube and our website for people who want to go back or see it for the first time. So that's where we are. Yes, Laura.
There, okay. A couple of questions.
Mhm.
You know how we have the words on the screen? I mean, if I'm watching from home,
Mhm.
I see the words, but there are also these itty bitty words that come in the middle of the bigger words.
Are you watching on Facebook or YouTube?
Well, I used to watch it on YouTube, but then I switched over to Facebook. So like this was on Facebook.
Mhm. You may have to turn off your closed caption on the video.
Well, if I watch it on YouTube, that won't be like that.
YouTube does have a closed caption. And if it's activated, then all you got to do is turn it off.
Well, I don't know how to do that.
I can walk you through that.
Okay, it's just, I just didn't know what those little words were. I mean, why they were in there too.
Yeah,
Because
that's not coming from us. That's coming from the way that Facebook is set up for you.
Okay, I'll have to find out about that.
Yeah, I'll happily walk you through that, Laura.
Okay.
I know it's disconcerting to have two different
It's like,
texts.
go.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I think I've mentioned this before, is, and I've told Daryl about this, and I don't know what was happening today because it looked like the camera, well, what I had noticed before was when the side camera was used, it's out of sync with the speaking, which drives me crazy.
Yeah.
But today, it looked like the back camera, you know,
Yep.
the camera in the back of the room, but it also was out of sync. Now, maybe it wasn't the back camera and I just thought it was. I don't know.
Yeah. That is and I appreciate that. It drives me absolutely crazy too.
It's like, you
Yeah.
know. And I couldn't even watch, I couldn't even watch the anthem. I mean, it's such a beautiful anthem, but just, it was so off. It's like, no, you know.
Yeah, that is we can set it perfectly and it'll work until everybody else, it can be a bandwidth issue. It can be multiple churches using Facebook and or YouTube at the same time. Therefore, speed gets slowed down. I do know that that's something that we can take up to a certain limit to fix, but if we fix it in-house, having it hit your house fixed is a problem that.
Well, I just remember Daryl saying something about that, but that maybe wasn't the case with, I mean, the two different cameras. I mean, that shouldn't be. If one is working, one camera is just fine and on spot, but the other one never is the side camera.
It's an ongoing source of choice words. So I hear what choice words, yes.
and so my thought was, I don't want to ever use the side camera because like when someone is speaking from the podium, we can also use the back camera on that and turn it a little bit, and that works just fine. And so, if someone's wearing a mask, you can't tell, but if they aren't wearing a mask, which I hope we won't be, much, but it's just too disconcerting.
Yeah, and I share that with you, and one of the things when I get to go home and before youth group is I will watch both on YouTube. I'll skim it, YouTube and Facebook, and make notes. So you're giving me a leg up in that today, Laura. So thank you for that. But it's an ongoing source of working on it. And like I said, we could get it perfect. And then come Sunday morning, because everybody else is using platforms or, in churches, it slows it down.
You also were going to, I thought, talk about in this thing about the uses of this technology now, where you're headed with this.
We'll come back to that. I want to just answer. I know Georgina had her hand up, so I want to
Make sure.
you're unmuted.
Okay. I was just to say, we listened from two different platforms, one iPad in one room and then the cell phone in the other, and it was perfect. There were no problems. And I just wanted to throw that out because maybe it's, well, I'm not a technology person. I'm not going to guess what's happening on Laura's side of town, but it came in fine here.
Okay.
So let me muddy the water there by saying that.
Muddy away, muddy away.
It was
Eric.
And two.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Eric, if you're here with us, what was it like to worship in the parish hall?
Sorry, I was driving home.
Oh, I'm
here.
sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm home now.
Okay.
It was great. I thought, there was a few of us in there, and the kids came in and played for a little while, but the audio worked fine, and it was nice being in the building and being with people, and also being able to spread out. So I thought it worked really well.
Great. Thank you. I know that Jason Wilkinson was working really hard to make sure that was a good experience. So kudos to Jason and Jason Phelan for making sure that worked.
Eric, quick question. How many people were in the parish hall?
There were just a few of us. It was me and Cindy at first, and then, oh, sorry. I'm getting an Amber Alert.
Amber Alert. I got it too.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you heard that, but
About 3 people? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Ray came in, and then Bettina and the kids came in to color a little bit towards the end, but it was a nice little group.
Good.
Just checking. Jenny, you can bump up attendance by 1 person because I didn't get to the parish hall. So the number's off 1.
Okay. Will do. Thank you. So I heard someone knocking on the door. I want to make sure that they don't. Okay. So I'm going to ask, this is a dangerous question. Is the experience better now than it was around Christmas time? Yes. Okay. Brilliant. Good. And I know that when in September of 2020, August of 2020, when the vestry began to put together our technology plan, the science was no books, no sharing of things that you touch and then somebody else touches. And the science has come a long way. And so we will be putting the books back in the worship space for those who want to, use a prayer book or use a hymnal. However, that does not mean that the screens are going to go away. There are people who enjoy not having to hold anything when they're worshiping. So there'll be a both and in that space. For folks who want the book, they'll have the books, and those who don't, they won't. But that'll happen at the end of the month so that when we get into Lent, the hymnals and the prayer book will be back for people to use. Laura.
What in the world did those people who didn't like the books and the bulletins do before you put screens up? So they had that option.
Well, it wasn't available at the,
I
before.
know, but I mean, it didn't keep them from coming to church, whereas this frankly is keeping me away. The screens.
I understand that it is a disruption for some folks. I do. The pandemic has changed the way that we do worship and the way that we provide for those in our building. And one of those changes is to offer a hands-free way of worshiping. I don't know what they did before because we've never experienced it before.
They did what people in churches everywhere do. They use books or bulletins. And I mean,
What else?
I have a question.
Hold on, Linda, what else? Laura, what else?
Okay, go ahead. I have a question. I don't remember. Has the entire service been in the bulletin? Was that prior to the was the entire service in?
no.
No, hymns were not in their full, were not fully in the bulletin. Everything else was in the bulletin.
Okay, so I have a follow-up to that. I mean, I just wonder, was it an impediment for people because who were not familiar with the Episcopal liturgy to come in and try to, we often heard about the books and going to page 50 and then back to page 23, and back and forth. So I wonder if that was an impediment.
When I would meet with folks prior to the pandemic who were new to the Episcopal Church, new to our liturgy, there was a certain amount of discomfort with having more than one book to pick up and hold on to, especially when you don't know the lingo. We'd say leave us for a hymnal, but the hymnal didn't say leave us on it. It said lift every voice and sing. We'd say, the Book of Common Prayer, but it looks a lot like the hymnal, except a different color. But if you're new, you don't know that. So there is a bit of onboarding that would need to be done for someone who's new and wants to return to the church, to an Episcopal church, where having the information in the bulletin and on the screens makes it a great deal easier for them to focus on the embodiment of worship instead of wondering, is this the right book? And like I said, I've had several conversations prior to the pandemic with people who would utter their confusion about which book is what. We'll go to Laura and then Alvi and then Carmen and then Georgina. So Laura first, then Alvi, then Carmen.
I'm going to be grumpy. I also forgot one of the things I was going to say, but no, I didn't. Two things. One, that's where our welcoming community comes in. And this has happened before because I've seen it lots of times. When you see someone you think is new, you help them in terms of, the books, if they seem to be having a problem with that. Secondly, if I, who grew up in the Baptist church, can manage to become accustomed to the Episcopal liturgy and doing all of this book swapping and stuff like that, people can do that. I mean, if they're not going to come back again because it's like, oh my gosh, that's a problem, I'm sorry. And if we're not welcoming enough to make them feel comfortable, then
And I hear what you're saying on that. And, you know, part of the welcome that I would offer, and every once in a while still offers, if you get everything you need is in the bulletin or in this, I say now on the screens in front of you. If you get lost, just raise your hand. We'll get you caught up. You know, someone will help you find your way. And I said that too before the pandemic, in particular, because of the different books that we use. And St. Anne's is great about welcoming folks and helping them get situated. You're right. But it's different if you have a toddler in your arms or if you are impaired and can't use your arms, then this helps quite a bit. And now we're gonna, all right, so there are more hands up. We have Alvy, Carmen, then Georgina, and then Julie.
Hello, everyone. As somebody who is a cradle Episcopalian, and I can probably quote the Book of Common Prayer cover to cover, and I'm not saying that as to be a praise thing and for Bishop Curry to give me a sticker at the end of the day, but I understand the Episcopal liturgy and appreciate it, but at the same time, I really absolutely love using the bulletin for the entire part of the service, to have it there, to know that it's right there at my fingertips and that it's an easy one handheld guide to everything that's going on in the service. And then, of course, when it comes to the singing, which nobody wants to hear me do anyway, you know, to whether it be a Lift Every Voice and Sing or a Leave Us or the traditional hymnal, that to me, that's a lot easier. And then now that we're in the pandemic and we're using these screens, that's even easier, especially when, you know, when people that, you know, that, you know, look, my eyesight, my baby browns are not as sharp as they used to be. So having those screens there when my eyes are like, look, lady, I'm not about to read this print, look up. It's just, it's so much of a convenience. And then two, for someone who has an autoimmune disease, that as much as I want to be in the building, I can't. I can be at home and enjoy this service where I can rest and recover. And then when God in my body says, okay, now it's time for you to come back, to me, it feels as if I never even left. It's just one collective, but that's just me. So yes, St. Anne's will continue to be a sweet, sweet spirit. It's who we are. It's embedded in our body and soul. But I see this technology as welcoming. I mean, we've had a lot of members that have moved away and gone away for various reasons prior to and during this pandemic. And if this technology is allowing them that one single connection to something that feels like home for them, then we should do everything we can to try to embrace that as much as we possibly can.
Thank you for that, Alvy. I appreciate your thoughts and grateful that you're well enough to join us today in person. Carmen, and then Georgina, and then Julie.
I just wanted to say that regardless of what the science says, there are still people in our congregation who do not want to share books. And I think that the screens are a really good compromise for those people. And there are lots of reasons for screens, but I think that's something that's probably never going to go away for some people. And they will not ever want to share. I mean, I think the pandemic has changed us forever in lots of ways. And I think there are still people who, regardless of what the science says, will say, I just don't want to do that. And the screens are good for that.
Thank you for that, Carmen. I hadn't even thought about that perspective, so I appreciate you bringing that up. Georgina, are you with us?
I'm with you. Am I unmuted? Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yes. First of all, I love the bulletin. I never leave my bulletin behind. I actually bring it back home, and through the week, I redo the service. I even look up the hymns. Now, having said that, I too am a cradle Episcopalian. I have seen many, many, many changes in our church through the years. And while initially some of them were hard, now they're old hat. When I first saw the screen at St. Anne's, I knew there was a reason for it. And I have to tell you, being 73, I remember Mitch Miller, and I was so thankful there wasn't a bouncing ball up on the screen as we read and sang. And but now I love the screen. I love to be able to look up in worship and not look down, but that's me. I love the screen. I love seeing the new people being able to look up and follow, and not having to find where they are and turn the pages for them. I think it's a good thing in time. And I think if people will give it a chance, if people are staying away because of the screen, that's not helping our community. And deep down, I don't think it's helping their spirit of worship. I am here to say, I like that screen now. It helps me.
Thank you for that, Georgina. Julie Risher.
Okay. First of all, I do have to share a great quip my wife made on the way home, which is that Winston-Salem Police Department has noted an inordinate number of speeding citations issued to members of St. Anne's Episcopal Church around noon today, because we were all flying home. But a few things. Number one, Georgina, thank you for that. And I just want to give a little bit of background. The whole launch, as Jenny mentioned, we were building a plane in the air, the vestry and Jenny, back in March of 2020, and the vestry made the best decision they could with the information they had in July maybe of 2020. Is that right, Jenny? And Martha Murphy was the outgoing senior warden. And Martha, I would trade places with you, because as the incoming senior warden, everybody assumed that we had done all this just willy-nilly. And part of the problem, I think, too, with the screens is that, or with the whole thing, is that by the time the vendor that we had selected, who was not competent to do the work, we found out the hard way, by the time we realized our initial measure was way, excuse me, way behind the changes in science. So we were kind of playing catch up all of 2020 to 2021. But and all that by way of saying, in hindsight, we probably should have kept the screens up until there was something on them. But that was, and I'm not making excuses, I'm just explaining. Between Jenny and myself, we probably spent 20 hours a week on this. And wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
At that time, I mean, so all of that by way of saying, we were fed a line, we checked them out, and they were actually doing something they didn't have to. Brian and Gru has been great. As for the screens, I will say that, well, I'm a trained mediator. And what I tell people when I go to mediate their cases is basically what happens in mediation is that nobody leaves happy, but everybody leaves with something with which they can live. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind when we look at technology. Mm-hmm. I hate the stained glass windows in St. Anne's. I'm sorry, I just do. I think they're unattractive. They have a beautiful story behind them. So, I say, okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at those. I'm going to think about the beautiful story, and I'm going to worship. And so we're not going to please everybody, but I think and then I'll shut up. But we are so blessed to have Jenny Wilder as our rector right now, because she does have some technological skills, and she can talk to these people. And Jason and Daryl and Julie Myberg, everybody has just been cyber angels for us. But we have done the best we can to navigate this thing. And I just think we're not going to make everybody happy, but we can all live with it and worship God together. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for that, Julie. Faith, your hand is up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't find the little hand symbol to put up. But anyway, I just have a question.
Sure.
Why do we have two screens instead of one centered screen? I don't mind the screens particularly, but it does throw me off a little to have two with identical things on it within my visual field.
That was what was recommended at the time when we went with a company for symmetry purposes. I think there was a hope of we knew that you're right. We went with what we were told we needed because we didn't know any better. And then when it came time to replace the projecting screens with TVs, again, we already had it rooted in the wall, and it made a symmetrical offering. In the back, you'll know we only have one instead of two for the choir, though. I don't have an answer other than the fact that we were told we needed two, so we went with two.
And it would be either costly or very laborious to reduce it to one centered screen.
I don't know how, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to ask Jason at Grind and Brew.
I don't know if anybody else has the same reaction that I do. I mean, I really don't mind it terribly, but having two screens with identical things, both very close within my visual field, I find myself a little bit distracted.
Well, Jenny, we could go in light of what Faith's saying. I kind of have the same reaction, and Eric made a good point that you don't want a screen right behind the cross. That seems sort of strange, but we could pick one side or the other and just stick it there. I mean, we only have a pulpit on one side. So anyway.
You only have a pulpit on one side, but traditional architecture for churches is an ambo on one side and a pulpit on the other for symmetry.
Okay, fine.
Linda, thank you for your hand. Yes.
I have not been in the church to worship since 2020. So I can't really make a decision on what it feels like to worship inside the church with the screens up there. And I feel like some folks have spoken about that they're okay with it, or they've learned to become okay with it. But for those of you who have been in the church, worshiped in the church, and are not real keen on these screens, if there are any of you out there, I'd just like to get a better sense of, is it distracting? Is it aesthetics? If anybody wants to comment on that, so I can get a better sense, since I have not worshiped in the church with the screens.
Good. Great question, Linda. I saw Joss raise her hand.
Okay, there we go. Yes, to me, the screens are distracting me from the flow of the service. I want my focus, if I'm looking up, to be on the cross, and I have to avert my eyes from the busyness of the screens, because it's like double vision.
Mm.
I'm seeing Jenny celebrate, but I'm seeing Jenny and Jenny celebrate. So yes, the way I get used to it is don't look at them. I do remember growing up in the Episcopal Church as a kid, I didn't physically use the prayer book, but it got so I knew the flow of the liturgy. I had it memorized, not because I studied it, but just because of the flow of the congregation. That gets into you, and that's how I, got away. Laura, as Laura was saying, what did people do before that? They just, if you were that long Episcopalian, you learned the liturgy and it stayed with you, not for the lessons, but the parts that were said corporately. Also, for newcomers now, they probably don't even know what the Book of Common Prayer is, that it exists. That if you don't want to, use the books there, you can buy one and have it at home and bring it on Sunday. Mine is my daddy's, and it's very precious for me to be holding my daddy's, prayer book. So I don't have to worry about sharing it that way. And I'd kind of hoped that way back when we had let people check out a prayer book to take home and bring back, and that family would use that prayer book every Sunday, and then we wouldn't be sharing books. I thought that would have been a way to get around it when we were allowed to touch things, because for a while there we couldn't even have the bulletins. So I completely understand the dilemma that the vestry was in at the time, and how do we keep this church functioning and glued together in this extremely trying situation. I just sort of feel like now we could maybe one screen would help. I thought maybe if we had smaller screens above the pulpit and above the tabernacle, so that if people wanted to just plain look at the service, they could, and the screens wouldn't be part of the picture. But that's probably not a possibility. But yeah, I'll learn to live with it. I'll come back when, as soon as I get my other cataract taken care of and I've dodged COVID, I'll come back. It just is, it's a lessening of the experience for me to have them there. Just my thoughts,
I'm grateful for your thoughts, Joss. I hear you on what you're saying, and just want to add that at the newcomers class that we're starting in Lent, not only will the newcomers know what the Book of Common Prayer is, but we're going to walk our way through the entire thing. So they will know how we are shaped and formed by this book, and why it's important for them to become aware and introduced to it. And I will share with y'all that I'm not a fan of screens. Not a fan. But I understand how they have afforded us to offer worship for people in the building, worshiping in the building, the same availability of music offerings and seeing the performers, seeing the choir members sing. It's also afforded me an opportunity to be creative with sermon writing from time to time by offering a video or imagery to go with the sermons that was not allowed or available prior to the pandemic. So if you're going to see it on your screen at home, then we need to be able to see it on a screen in the worship space. So that's where we are with that. Laura, I believe you had your hand up.
Jenny already knows how I feel about this, meaning the screens. I do have a real problem with them, because for me to have these big black things up on the wall behind the altar and on either side of the cross is incredibly distracting. It just takes away from the sanctity of the whole setup of the church, of physically. And I have a real hard time with that, you know, because all I see are those those big black things up there. And it also unfortunately calls to mind much bigger and a type of church that St. Anne's isn't, that has huge screens, that's always had everything on them and everything. But those are not liturgical churches, and churches that are set up with the way Episcopal churches are physically. So I have a real problem with it. And I have been very appreciative since we've had the TV screens up there. I've noticed in the cameras that we have now that the cameras are positioned so that you don't see those screens when you're looking from home. You see the altar and all of that, but the camera kind of, it's because it's up high on the wall, it's down a little bit, so you don't see those screens. So I don't have to fight with that, you know, it's just not there. And it used to be that I was told, well, you have to have those, you have to have that there for it to be able to come through, to be able to show online. But then I was told that, no, that's not the case now. You don't have to have that to be able to have it show online. So that took away that. But now we're saying, oh, but it's so helpful for people there. And obviously I see that a lot of people like it. So, you know, this is just my thing. I just find it really distracting. I mean, St. Anne's is a simple church physically and aesthetically, and I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I don't need a church to look like St. Paul's. But can you imagine being at St. Paul's and having behind the altar big black screens like that? What would that feel like? So I don't know what I personally am going to do about this. As I said, I don't see this at home. I mean, the St. Anne's community is important to me, and I want to be back there soon, but I don't know what to do about it. And I know, you know, Jenny was talking about, well, there's special ways in which we can use it. Well, like today with, and maybe I was the only one at home who had a problem with the solo not having the sound hookup with the visual part of it. Maybe that just was me. Maybe it didn't, no one else at home saw that. But in terms of the opportunities like Jenny's talking about that we could use it for sometimes, that may be so, and that may be a good thing, but that would mean, you know, we didn't need it all of the time, except that now people think, hey, this is good. You know, we like this. Why don't we just have that up there? You know, my thought had been we could have, you know, a curtain there over it that could be curtains that could be drawn apart when we were going to use them in that way, those special ways, those times, but that other times they didn't need to be there, except that now it appears that a lot of people like to have those big words up there because it's easier than using the bulletin or whatever. So this is just, I guess, my problem, but I wanted to say how it, I needed to say how it makes, how I see it, how it makes me feel about that, what I consider a sacred space there, and it makes it not so sacred. So
I appreciate your thoughts, Laura. Thank you again for sharing how this is impacting you. And you know, a question was asked, can we put it off to the left or to the right over the tabernacle or over the pulpit? That's worth an exploration. We could not use the same size that we have. Those TVs are 96 inches long. So that would be too big for that space. And then getting it into a brick wall, because if both of those are brick walls securely, would be an issue. But you know, we can certainly explore that. I do know, I can't imagine what it would look like at St. Paul's. I do know in the National Cathedral, they have them every 8 to 10 rows on the columns on both sides. There is no wall behind the altar or behind, and the high altar is actually affixed to the wall, so they couldn't get a TV back there. No one would see it anyway because of the rood screen and the choral stalls. What else? John.
Okay, got it. Trying to unmute. Yeah. Well, my kudos to Jason and Daryl for all the work they've done. It has, I think, been great for the transition. Having said that, I think I'm in the same mindset as Laura. I come to church looking for inspiration and time to meditate, and I find the screens just very distracting. I think the only thing we're missing is following the bouncing ball to make it complete. So I just don't. I'd like to get away from it. I had hoped that at the outset it was a transition that was necessary, and that would be the end of it. So that's I've spoken my piece there.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate your thoughts on the matter too.
I sort of feel, I mean, I was raised in the very traditional Catholic church, so there were no screens and stuff. And I still don't particularly like to eat at certain restaurants because I feel like all I'm doing is watching TV with all these different TVs that are on and the sports bars and stuff. And I remember once when a group of us with Soul Force went to Jerry Falwell's church in Lynchburg. And, there were the TV cameras moving up and down the aisles. And I sort of felt like I was at the Tonight Show rather than in a church. Having said that, I think we're being dragged into what the younger people are looking for in some of their worship. And I don't know, perhaps you need to have one room that's dedicated to a chapel, like the big cathedrals, have little chapels for those who don't like the big experience.
Mhm.
But maybe we need to look at something like that, that there's a chapel that could be put up in one of our rooms and just used for those who don't like the bigger experience. But I sort of feel, I know I used to be turned off when we would come and visit our daughter and son-in-law, and they'd take us to Redeemer, and I'd see a band up there with guitars and drums and, you know, kazoos. It sort of turned me off to the worship, but I must admit that I've gotten used to it. And there are times when I like it and think that kind of music is very appropriate for worship that I probably wouldn't have thought of before. So I think we just have to give some of this time and experiment. I'm not turned off by the two screens. They're fine. I would hate to see just one screen block instead of a cross.
Yeah.
And I guess the choir only sees one screen when they're up in the choir. Now, whether we'll ever get a choir again is another thing, but
Yeah.
okay, my
Well,
piece.
I appreciate you sharing that, Jack. Linda, your hand is raised, and then we'll go to Georgina.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone who gave their perspectives. It does help. And correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of the screens now is mostly the words?
Yeah. So words, music, video.
So a recorded musical piece.
Yeah.
So what that leads me to, if the screens just had words instead of like, you know, 3 Jennies all up there, would that make a difference?
I want to say, I don't, so when I'm looking out at a screen from where I sit, there is no camera image on the words. So it is just the words. I haven't, Faith, can you tell me what you see when you're sitting in the congregation?
Yeah, I'm not seeing 3 Jennies. There's just the words. The words are the only thing on the screens.
Yeah.
I didn't know that anywhere that something else showed. I thought it was just the words, unless it's been a pre-recorded something.
Yeah,
But otherwise, it's just words.
I think initially there was camera image and the words, but they've transitioned to just having the words on the screen and not the camera images. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mhm. Georgina, you wanted to speak.
I just wanted to say, St. Anne's isn't the building. It's not what's up on the wall. St. Anne's is the community that I feel people are missing if they stay away because there's a screen. And I just hate that. Initially, I didn't like the screens, but I've come to accept them, and I've actually, again, for me personally, come to enjoy, because I just feel that sense of community there. Please don't stay away because you don't like the screen. Come and see what it's all about and give it a chance. St. Anne's is not the building. It's the people who come and worship. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that, Georgina. I will echo what Alvy has written. You know, we will begin our 8 o'clock service again in March. And we've continued to hold our evening Celtic Eucharist at 6 o'clock on Wednesdays, and neither of those services uses the screens at all. We do live stream the Celtic Eucharist using a phone because there are people who would love to be a part of that service but are working and can't get off in time, so they watch it later when they're home. So for folks who are distracted or don't appreciate or don't want to be in the service where the words are on the screen, those are two options already available to folks. Does it mean that you won't be able to that is not our, you know, our major celebration on Sundays? Yeah. But is it any less worshipful? No. So 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock are both available for folks who don't want to see the screens in action. So I want to, okay, Carmen.
I just wanted to say that the same thing as Georgina. St. Anne's is about the people, and that's what I love about. I mean, if we were worshiping in a barn, I'd still go because I love the people there. And I don't want to lose people that I really enjoy and really love being with because of the screens. And if we take them down, we'll still lose people who feel like we've wasted money, and it just, either way it goes, we're going to lose people. And I don't want that at all. I want to keep it like it is. So I really do appreciate Georgina saying that, because that's how I feel too.
Yeah. And I am under the impression that we have lost people over the screens, and that's sad. It's a loss for us and it's a loss for them. And my prayer is that they will return at some point. And until then, I pray that they are being spiritually nourished wherever it is that they feel comfortable worshiping. We've been at it for a little over an hour. Is there anything that is unsaid that needs to be said? I will open the floor up for that. Did I say that right? Is there anything that hasn't been said that needs to be said?
I don't know if this wasn't already said, but I went to worship today. I did not take a bulletin. It didn't get in the way because virtually everything was up on the screen, and I was not doing so much of this.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's a net positive.
Thank you, Roddy. And Roddy, were you in the parish hall today too, or were you in the worship space? In the
I was
nave?
in the main worship space.
Okay. All right. Great.
Jenny, I have one question. You asked, for stuff that hadn't been said, but I guess really I'd just like to ask a question, and it's probably not really a fair question because you don't have a crystal ball, but not fair never stopped me before, so there. But where do you see the technology going in the short term? And by short term, I mean 1 year, 2 years, and then, 1 year to 6 to 18 months, and then longer term.
So that's a good question, and I appreciate you asking that. I'm hoping that within the next little bit of time that the hiccups that still happen will be ironed out, or that the folks who volunteer their time and their stomach lining to help us on Sunday mornings figure out, have a working knowledge base on how to solve it on their own without having to reach out to Grind and Brew. So that is my initial hope for the coming future. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to incorporate the use of screens more effectively into our worship. I am cognizant of perhaps looking at a relocation of the screens to other areas in the space. Again, our initial company that we worked with did not have a lot of vision beyond down front, and made it seem like the outside areas were not doable. So perhaps that is another thing we can look into doing. I also want to say that as much as folks want to use books or bulletins, and that's great, and I'm glad that we can. The science has shown that we can now. Who knows? Not that I hate saying this out loud, but if another pandemic comes upon us and it prevents us from using things and touching things that you have touched, that I have touched, we're ready to continue to worship without bulletins or books again because of the screens. My hope is that it becomes that the technology enhances a person's experience in worshiping, that it brings them closer to God, that it frees them up to be more receptive, not only to participating in the worship, but also participating in the community. We have welcomed over 40 new people to St. Anne's in the last year, and only a few of them come from an Episcopal background. Most of them are coming from Baptist or Catholic background, and they have found, if they're worshiping with us in person, that not having to figure out the liturgy all on their own has been a source of welcome. So I don't want to stop that kind of source of welcome for folks who are attending faithfully in the building for worship. But I do think we can look at moving the screens to a less distracting area. I know, Linda, you had your hand up, and then, and Julie, does that answer the question?
Actually, it's
Yeah.
Stuart.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's Stuart. Hi.
Hey.
I also haven't been to the church, so I don't really know how distracting the screens are, but just from being at home, what I do find distracting following the worship on the screens is when the words don't keep up with what's actually being said, or and maybe if we could put more words on the screen and then scroll it earlier, let the screen actually lead. The words always lead whatever is occurring. I don't know, but I just find it distracting if I'm saying a prayer or whatever, and the screen is still stuck on the prior sentence, or so maybe increasing the number of sentences that are being displayed on the screen. I don't know what the exact answer is, but it's just as far as it being distracting, I just want to mention that it is distracting that the words aren't keeping up with the actual prayer or song or what have you. So that's it.
All right, great, thank you. And I know Daryl's on the call, so Daryl, maybe that's something we can look at for future services. I know Alvy's got her hand up, and then Faith had also raised her hand. So Alvy and then Faith.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep mine brief. And just as somebody who's one of the co-chairs for pastoral care and in making our various phone calls and cards and notes and letters to parishioners who, for various reasons, cannot be in the worship space, the notes and feedback that I get from them in saying that they are eternally grateful that they can have that piece of St. Anne's to come through their computer screen or on their phone, or if they missed a worship service and couldn't get there, they know that they can go back to YouTube and rewatch it again. It just, I cannot begin to explain how happy that makes me. Or to hear someone say, can they send me a large printed bulletin? My eyes aren't as great as they used to be, but I want to follow along. Or when we did in-home visits, to have someone who's far more trained than yours truly to go with that person through the worship service, and they're like, God, I felt like I haven't even left. So that just, you can't see it, but there's a huge smile on my face right now. And it just, it fills me up to know that we're touching them in some form of fashion. And I'm like, God, something I'm a part of is actually working. And that's just beautiful for me.
Oh, Albie, thank you so much for that. Faith, you had your hand up. You're muted, Faith.
There. I would love it if at some point we could put actual artwork on the screens. That would actually enhance an experience rather than a black screen.
Yeah. I know we, the guys have from time to time been able to put stained glass into those screens prior to worship and then after worship. So it is part of the way we can use the screens that way. I'm gonna do one more all call. And if there's anything else you want to say, please say it now. We are listening. We appreciate, I say we collectively, I'm as a member of the leadership at the church, but also as a member of the body. We do appreciate you all taking the time to sit down and have this conversation. Daryl, what about it?
Hi from Raleigh.
Hi from Raleigh.
To that point a moment ago, I think it was Faith that was talking about putting something like stained glass or whatever interesting on the screens. When there's nothing else really going on, there's no words, there's no video or anything like that running. Just for the sheer fun of it, when I was sitting back there with our Technolites and they were getting used to our new technology having to do with the cameras, those kids are, I call them kids, but they take to that stuff like they look at us like we're like, are you kidding? This is simple. but just on a whim, because fortunately I can talk to them on their level and they seem to appreciate that. I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you guys, as clever as you are, went out and did a search for every single world famous stained glass? I don't care where it's from, what church, what denomination, I don't care. I just think that would be really fascinating to put up these things that are historical, and you might not ever see it otherwise. I mean, I've never been in Notre Dame, for example, but I would love to see that. And this would be a clever way for us to really educate people about what goes on in other parts of the world, which I just think would be fascinating. Well, by the way, the Technolites thought that was a great idea and they would get right on it. So, but I'm just throwing that out there for what it's worth, because when Faith said that, I said, you know what? That's the conversation I was having with our young friends. So that's all. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you for that, Daryl. And that is a piece that we haven't touched on, is that the technology, whether we have screens in the space or not, has opened up an opportunity for our younger members to offer their gifts of knowledge and know-how in a way that has never been the case before. So yeah, we call them the Technolites, and they are assisting us in running our worship for folks who are worshiping from home. And that's pretty neat, I think. John?
I think Daryl's comments were great, and I just want to make sure that we involve Julie Risher so we can make her happy.
I hear you on that.
Pardon me, sir. I'm very happy.
No, it's just about the stained glass windows.
We want to make sure you like the stained glass.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Anybody else who hasn't had a chance to listen who wants to say something? I'm sorry, that didn't sound right. Does anybody want to say something that hasn't said anything yet? All right. It's an ongoing journey. And where we started from was my cell phone in my living room on Zoom. Learning how to do music videos was the next step. And we're grateful, so grateful to David Pegg and the choir and the members of our choir who enhanced our worship from a very early start. And David and Lauren didn't sign up for this either, but they figured it out. And y'all have hung in there as members of the body through all of the ups and downs, the oopses, and we're gonna, when we make it to the other side of this pandemic, we will have been changed, because like baptism, the pandemic, we entered in one way and we will exit completely different and changed. And we'll look like a different body because members have joined us since we've been working online, and people have left us since we have been working online. And all I can say is thank you. Thank you for trusting me to be your rector during this unprecedented time. And thank you for your humor and your ability to laugh when things go awry. And thank you to those who from time to time have dropped beer off or wine off at my office because they know the stress. And thank you to those who have stepped up to take on the leadership role of our technology. And thanks to God for keeping us all connected in every any way possible. And we give thanks for the humility that comes from adding technology to our worship. And at the end, with screens or no screens, perfect running worship services or those that are filled with hiccups, in the end, the main goal of our worship is to praise God and to be fed, to go out and feed others. And if we can do that, we have lived into the purpose and the call to be St. Anne's in the process.
Amen.
Amen. All right, friends, God bless you all. This meeting has been recorded. It'll be posted on our YouTube page, and a source to draw from as we consider the next revolution of how to use technology in our space.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, everybody.
Peace out.
And go team, whatever team it is, go team. I'm just excited about the nachos my wife is making. So.
Hey, look, whatever the excuse, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
Nachos and wine are great anytime. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Everybody stay safe.
Bye. Have a good week.